Hey guys, it's Mike Monty, one half of Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. And we want to reach out to all the fans out there who have supported our show to say thank you. Thank you for making 2021 one of our best years. And one of our best years was because of Anchor. Anchor, the way that you can have your voice heard. You can be just like us. Record your own podcast. Use the Anchor tools to edit your podcast. Use it on a phone. Use it on your computer. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all with Anchor, they're totally free. So be just like Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Farah. We're looking together for a great 2022. We've got huge guests coming on board. Oh, yeah. You probably wonder why Jimmy's not here right now. Well, he's prepping for one of the best interviews we're about to have, and we're going to surprise someone with. So hang aboard with us, and don't forget, be like us and use Anchor.
Good evening and welcome to Wrestling Rewind. I am your host, Angel Amoroso, and I am joined by my co-host, the Iron Man, Tommy Cairo.
How you doing, Angel?
And tonight, we're going to get into Wrestling Archives with Tommy Cairo. So yes. Let's get into it right away, Tommy. What do we got for tonight?
All right. Well, what we have for tonight is some profiles on, famous people in the wrestling industry, and a lot of the younger people don't really know about some of the history. And, being a fan today is not just what's going on currently. It's the history of what's going on currently. And it's very interesting because without this information, you're really not getting the full picture of, this industry. And a good education in it, especially, I recommend anybody who's currently, involved in the business of pro wrestling. I would hope that even at, especially at the lowest level where they're in the schools, this is one thing I think is missing. So if we could, educate people a little bit and get them to understand, it's really considered a privilege to be able to, be a pro wrestler. It was always that way. And quite frankly, a lot of the guys that are involved today would never have passed muster back in the day when there was 10 trainers in the whole country and everybody came out of those places. So, the history is just way beyond what you see, currently. And it's great. I mean, we're going to start off with like one of the most prolific, one of the most famous, as far as you want to talk about ECW style wrestling, the early hardcore when nobody was doing it. The Sheik was one of them. I would think he based most of his career off of some kind of implement, something that was added. And this is the guy that was
the Sheik.
The Sheik.
Yeah, usually on a fork, a stick, anything he could find, right?
Yeah, but he did have a favorite. I don't recall it at the time. All it was probably a pencil from the hotel room taped up with
like a little spike.
Yeah, a little spike. It could be anything. Use a straw if you wanted to. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
They see something in your hand and then they see blood, and that's it. All right, so we're going to start right off with the Sheik. Again, for you hardcore people, this is the guy that started it all for sure in this country, All right, here we go. The Sheik. You didn't have to see the Sheik in person to be scared to death of him. Just stroll to the magazine rack at a local newsstand in the 1960s and 70s, and chances are you'd find his piercing eyes locked in a satanic trance, the embodiment of pure evil. Next to his face, headline writers added terror to the countenance. Wrestler with a flamethrower in his fingertips, the Sheik, mysterious as the night. The Sheik was to wrestling press what Michael Jordan was to Sports Illustrated, the perfect cover image to capture a sport. I love that guy. He gave you a lot of great shots with the facial expressions. These are the photographers that are saying, this is a guy that's easy to capture because he's giving it to you.
Sure.
He's making all these faces and he knows they're there.
Quite the performer.
That's how he's going to get his gimmick over. He wants those close-up shots with the guy. He's got the thing in his guy's eye or whatever, his mouth. You know, just way
I
beyond.
once saw him pound a photographer at the arena, a female photographer, Linda Rufa. He came backstage and pounded her in the head with a cane, you know, and she started crying. It was like a total shoot. He pounded her like until she cried really hard. I think he was headed for me was the thing.
Yeah,
but
talk about a total shoot. He had the heels and the faces over for dinner, and they sat in separate rooms. That's the truth. They sat in separate rooms. They said, I don't know who it was, but he said to sum up the Sheik, you would have to say that he was and lived his gimmick 24/7. Nobody ever saw him put it in the closet for an hour, you know?
Right.
And that always instilling in his mind, this may be real. And you may be in there with him one night and he may just flip out and rip your head off. This is what he instilled, which was unbelievable. All right. He was a good bad guy. Now there you got right there. If there is such a thing, now there is, right? Fans love to boo him. He really drew the emotions out of the fans. He was a great performer. During a career that lasted almost 50 years, it's safe to say Edward Farah, the Sheik, drew as much heat from the fans around the world as any wrestler who ever lived. Whether it came from jabbing opponents with a broken pencil, there you go, hurling fire at them, or violently rolling his eyes and tongue as he tortured some poor soul. The Sheik had a magnificent heel face. His eyes, he was terrifying to look at. I remember he saw me at the airport and he put his face right against mine and it scared me to death. I had about 2 hours of sleep that night. Veteran star Lanny Poffo recalled, legendary manager Bobby Heenan said the Sheik was his favorite villain. The guy started hardcore wrestling. He would stick you with a screwdriver. He threw fire. Heenan said, plus, he never spoke. He never did an interview. He never spoke a word of English. He terrified people. He didn't take bumps. He didn't have to take bumps. If he had the ring, you didn't know what he was going to do. He was the best heel the business ever had. Even into the 1990s, when he was in his 60s, the Sheik could still lunge at a crowd and cause fans to scatter like cockroaches. According to Dave Brzezinski, a.k.a. Supermouth Dave Drayson, who managed him after starting as a writer and photographer for the Detroit promotion. To go out with him for a couple years was just a thrill of a lifetime. I was always scared to death because the heat that guy could generate. I never knew what the heck was going to happen to me. Going to the ring was fine, but to walk back to the dressing room was the scariest moment I've ever had in the business. This guy just walks out there and scares everybody to death.
Sure. Just by his looks, he was gruesome. He looked like a horror character, you know. So and even not speaking, sometimes not saying words is more intimidating than blurting a whole bunch of bullshit out, threatening people, you know. It's just like that aura about him where, you know, scary guy. Scary guy.
Serious, right?
Right. Very serious.
That's the part I think.
Too much to get over. No. Just be violent. You know,
I mean, he certainly didn't have to work an aggressive, athletic style. You know,
right.
The whole time. You know,
right. Some people have their gimmicks, like he was the first of like hardcore, the hardest core hardcore. You know, sticking you with screwdrivers and pencils and whatever he could find, and the Sheik was nuts. And I was there to attend one of his shows in the 90s, and he was insane. It was insane.
Yeah. Crazy, right? And all the time he was probably, you know, as soon as he got behind closed doors, you know, and by himself, you know, he could maybe, you know, not be the Sheik, but maybe not, you know. But it tells a little bit of his upbringing, which we'll go through a little of that. Farhad's parents emigrated from Syria to Michigan, where he was born in 1926. The family was Lebanese, but Lebanon did not become a separate country until 1943. He joined the U.S. Army in 1944. Now, the Sheik was in the U.S. Army. Like, can you figure that out? That's weird, right? You would think that would come out. You would think that would come out. Crazy.
You know, from what I understand, is he like he's Sabu's uncle?
Yes, that's true.
Right.
Yeah. He joined the U.S. Army in 1944 and started training after the war with promoter Bert Ruby, Detroit's office. So that was a wrestling promotion right there in the area. While working as a day laborer, with Farah's vaguely foreign looks, Ruby started him out as the Sheik of Araby, a well-to-do Middle Easterner who incorporated Sheik and Sultan gimmicks that, I'm sorry, what is that? Well-to-do Middle Easterner who incorporated Sheik and Sultan gimmicks that had bounced around wrestling for years. Okay, so previously there were Sheiks, wasn't the first one.
Sure.
He wasn't then, he wasn't then the bloodlust scoundrel that he would become. Even worked on the Christiani Brothers Circus in 1950 and 51. But televised wrestling from Chicago popularized his act, which consisted of attendant Princess Salima, his wife Joyce, adopting Farhat's mother's name, snakes, incense, and endless delay in folding his turban. So he made a big process of folding his gear, his garment.
Okay. And he had a snake? Right? They have a snake with him? Like a snake charming act?
Yeah. So,
wow.
You know how Sabu did? Sabu had the same thing with the girl that just died, Melissa Coates. That's the same gimmick.
Did they have a snake?
She was like a genie. You see her? No.
Yeah. Did they have a? Oh, okay. I was going to say that would have been pretty elaborate, but
yeah. Snakes, incense, and an endless delay in folding his turban. Chicago also appears to have been the breeding ground for his crazed look. Years later, Jim Lancaster, a local wrestler, I believe, who got his start in the Sheik's Detroit territory, listened to him describe his descent into madness during a talk in a Cleveland locker room. He said that a cameraman in Chicago said, "You know what you ought to do? You ought to go look at the camera and act like you're crazy and act like you're out of your mind and roll your eyes, that kind of stuff." And they got to talking, and he made a deal with the cameraman. "I'll be in this corner, and I'll do this expression." That's really where it kind of started, as I overheard it, Lancaster said. Through the 1950s and early 60s, the Sheik was a top draw just about anywhere he went. So wait, let's go back to that. So here's a cameraman who said to him, "Go over there and act crazy, and we'll videotape it." And that became his gimmick, because he was one of the guys that would come out, especially in Japan, where if you were to get hit by a wrestler physically, you would be blessed. So they weren't running away, the people. It's crazy. And he would come out and lunge like at the crowd, and the whole crowd would go back. So, that's pretty powerful. And that's what guys are missing today, is that the difference between a play, okay, and TV is that TV, we got the close-ups, we can see all the little stuff. A play, you have to project out, right? They have to see you, because you're not right on top of them. It's no different than the guy would do a gesture where he would pick a guy up like he's gonna, or he would gesture, he's the heel. He would gesture to the babyface, point across the ring, and then he would make believe, like take a guy by the back of his pants and throw him over the top. He would do that physically, okay, mimic it. And then he would shake, dust off his hands. Like, I'm going to take him, toss him out, and I'm going to dust off my hands. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that is something that heels did years ago. Drawing the people in because you're not right on top of them. Am I making that noise when I'm moving my hands?
No, you're good.
All right, so through the 50s and 60s, early 60s, the Sheik was a top draw just about anywhere he went. At no point was he considered a superior worker. We know that. But his matches emphasized violence and wild-eyed antics. Just one example, he started a near riot in Rochester, New York in 1961 by knocking out local favorite Elio DiPaolo, was like a Bruno type early, with a piece of steel after DiPaolo won by countout. Even
A
so,
piece of
former
steel?
world champion.
A piece of steel.
Yeah.
Like some just random piece of metal laying around a building.
No, I'm sure he had it
Steel.
tucked underneath
Excuse
something.
me. Right. Okay.
It was tucked in the turnbuckle, you know? Tucked it behind a turnbuckle.
Good enough.
Yep. But a piece of metal. Steel. Yeah, a piece of steel.
Now, that's an innovator of hardcore right there.
Yeah. Well,
Seriously.
you might have just seen it laying on the ground. You know, I've often done that, left the ring with a guy, and whenever I had a chance to grab something. Why? I'll tell you why. How are you going to drag a guy by his hair from one end of the arena to the other? He's going to let you do it? You got to be hitting him.
Right.
So you pick up stuff, and so you're right. This was hardcore before anybody said, you know, move
Exactly.
some furniture. Yeah. All right. A world champion Lou Thesz, who had little time for gimmicks, said the Sheik had remarkable drawing power. Thesz came to admire his foe during his handful of matches. He was a terrific salesman. Thesz said on WrestlingClassics.com before his death, once in Chicago, when I didn't buckle to his antics and wanted him to wrestle, he just walked out of the ring and didn't come back. He was a great guy, but not a wrestler. In fact, Eddie Farah Jr. said the Sheik took refuge from Thesz under a bus, prompting headlines that only accentuated the madman image. So, you know, he lived it, and you never saw him out of character. And, you know, he was scary, to say the least. And on top of that, he, like you said before, he didn't really do anything, you know? He didn't have to.
Right.
So,
right. Exactly. When you don't have to, it's nice when you don't have to. You have implements to kind of guide you along. But, you know, the first in hardcore, the innovator.
Yeah. I mean, even though you think you wouldn't have to be cardiovascularly fit, you know, he was jumping around all over the place. He might not have been doing like a lot of moves, but, you know, he's in the ring, out of the ring.
But when you're chasing after someone like a maniac, you know, you do have to have some kind of a level of some kind of fitness. So
yeah, exactly. So in 1964, the Sheik acquired the Detroit promotion from Jim Barnett and Johnny Doyle, but put himself on top. Okay, already this is bad. You know, really, it's the truth. That's the beginning right there. It's a bad thing. Not that they didn't do a lot of business, but ultimately that's what drove the business down. And his matches got shorter and shorter, and he was the champion all the time, and people stopped coming.
It's a shame.
So he acquired this Detroit promotion from Barnett and Doyle, put himself on top, and started a reign of fear along the Great Lakes that's never been equaled. He took the U.S. title in Detroit and held it most of the time until his promotion shut its doors in 1980. Working with Toronto promoters Frank Tunney, the Sheik ran off a 127-match unbeaten streak in Maple Leaf Gardens from 1964 to 1974. That's 10 years. Okay.
Wow.
Drawing bi-weekly. What's this?
Check this out.
Drawing bi-weekly crowds of 10,000. Every other week, you had a 10,000 crowd.
Wow.
For matches that seldom ran more than 5 minutes. He guarded against fan attacks as he was in the ring by keeping a razor blade in his fingers. He just had the ability to work everybody into a frenzy. He might cut you. He was known to do that. Swayze, beautiful Bruce, whom the Sheik helped get working papers so he could wrestle in Detroit. The guy was on fire for years in Toronto. The Sheik probably was at his most infamous when he plucked Ernie Roth, that's the Grand Wizard, the pint-sized voice of big-time wrestling in Calgary and elsewhere, stuck a fez on him, that little hat, and named him Abdullah Farouk, the beginning of the Grand Wizard. Dressed in brightly colored mod clothes that made audiences wince, for days of black and white, Farouk became the noble one's mouthpiece, an obnoxious, nattering talker who threatened opponents that the Sheik might break out of in fire on the next match. Ernie Roth was a trip, wasn't he? He was such a little shit, and he was just arrogant, so arrogant, said Irish Mickey Doyle, who broke into wrestling in Detroit. The first time I worked with the Sheik, we used to do TV in Dayton, Ohio, way back when. I think he slammed me 8 times in a row and then put the camel clutch on me. Then Ernie Roth comes in and puts the boots to me. This little 130-pound guy. He was a great manager, just that arrogance. Now, everybody knows, McMahon, he was the best. Ernie Roth, true story, he had a briefcase. Before anybody had pot from different places, he had a suitcase, and it was actually in little bottles and labeled. I never seen anything like that. I was like, wow. So, to me, he was the king then, to a young guy, you got a briefcase of marijuana from different countries.
It's like a treat.
I mean, come on. And I'll tell you a funny story.
It's like a dream come true. It's like landing in your lap, a bag full of weed.
Yeah. I met a girl, and when you first meet a girl and you're somebody that smokes weed constantly, you don't know if it's okay yet, and you might like her, so you try to hide it, right? So I was at the park with this girl, and we were hanging out and we were talking. It was a beautiful day, and I started to say, "Man, I wish I had," and I stopped because I'm thinking, I like her, and I don't know yet, So she goes, "What were you going to say?" I said, "Oh, nothing." She goes, "No, really, what were you going to say?" I said, "I wish I had a joint." She goes in her pocketbook and pulls out a clear tube with this like crazy bud in it, and I'm like, the heavens, opened up. Like,
you never know. You never know.
And she rolled it herself.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. Fantastic.
Listen, if we can't tell funny stories about the past, what good is it, right?
Exactly. It's all about rewinding, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's all about all the history we can fit in.
Yeah, I ain't scared to tell nobody anything. You know what I mean? Crap. I'm an open book. All right, so
you both, buddy.
Sheik always worked with the job guys. He always went 2 minutes. He would bite them and speak the Arabic language. In fact, the Sheik's famous babble, loudly blurted as he manhandled opponents, was a play on his home area of Michigan. He was actually saying the name of the city, Kalamazoo. Wow, it's crazy, right? Lancaster laughed. He would say it with that Arabic dialect, but he was saying Kalamazoo. Nobody knew what the language was. We bought everything. It was a work. He worked everybody. His most legendary feud was against Brazil. Bobo Brazil. Oh, my God.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I lost my sorry.
His legendary feud was against Bobo Brazil.
Yes, Bobo Brazil. And so the fans, I'm really messed up here. Give me a chance. I'm sorry. I have this to mark myself, and I don't do it. Detroit's Cobo Hall, where I was there maybe 5 or 6 times, they packed the joint. They absolutely packed the joint. There wasn't a single empty seat. It was really great wrestling, great theater. The place went nuts. The fans were on their feet for 10 minutes. Fans despised the Sheik, and some opponents felt the same way, saying he tried to hog the spotlight, turning heels into heroes so he could monopolize the bad guy side of the ledger. For instance, when Matt Gilmore got hot at Duncan McTavish in the early 70s, the Sheik tried to squash him in one match instead of letting a feud slowly brew. He wouldn't let anyone else get the heat. That, to me, isn't what the business is about.
That's a heel right there.
The problem is he killed it. Should have seen it, Hey, they all fall sooner or later. They're not WWE or, it's been around. These companies, they flourish for a few years. And
yeah, we're talking about another time.
Yeah.
Here, so it's all different,
But it was gritty, Like it was, that's the element of it that when you went past the book stand and there's 8 or 9 wrestle magazines out and 5 of them have bloody images, you go right to it. I mean, it's just it's natural. I mean, when I sell pictures at an event and I bring some bloody ones and I bring some regular ones, I'm always out of the bloody ones first.
Of course, that people want to see blood. If you have a picture, of course, they're going to buy that over anything else because just love to see that juice.
Here's what he would do, just to scare people. Had that look. I'm turning it upside down, and you see that he's just ripping. He's eating a piece of the program.
Crazy.
There were other times where I've seen he's used. I think it's like chickens or whatever. All right,
I gotta say that I took a lot from the Sheik when I actually wrestled, and I used to stab people with forks and bite them all over their bodies, then spit pieces of them out. And that was mostly and if I could grab a stick, something was laying around, I'd always use it. And that was something, Sheik-like about me, I think.
Yeah. And, sometimes we don't even know, or consciously realize that we may have grabbed something from somebody else. But I always had I could make that, go into that look, all the pictures I take.
Oh, I carried a fork with me purposely.
Well, it's good to have something just in case things aren't popping.
Implements are always nice to use. That's why I love that this Wrestling Archives is kind of dedicated to the Sheik, because I love to hear about it.
Yeah, and really, nobody really tried to copy him. I mean, you had a couple Sheik Adnan, LKC.
They weren't forking people in the head.
No, they weren't. Exactly.
That's what we want to see.
Yep. In other territories, Farhat's style was strictly non grata. Larry Matzik of the St. Louis office said there was some pressure to bring the Sheik into the city for promoter Sam Mucknick after a Detroit promotional war with Dick and the Bruiser died down in the early 70s. The Sheik was a member of the National Wrestling Alliance, which Mucknick ran from St. Louis. So Sam brought him in. He jumped Pat O'Connor before the match even begun, where he nearly had a riot, Sam said. That's it. He's done. That's it. So that's one town he can't go back to. But that was part of his gimmick. Banned in so many places. Banned in 10 countries, 12 countries.
It's more appealing to see someone then when you can see them, if they're banned in so many places, then when you finally see them in that little town on some independent show somewhere, you're like, oh, I'm going to rush there to go see them. And, that's how the guys make their money after they're banned everywhere.
Yeah, but people don't stop wanting to see them. And,
you want to see them more then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like they said, they didn't like that madman part. The Sheik stuff was never going to go here. So never. We had him in twice, and that was it. Never again. Stories about the Sheik shortchanging wrestlers on paydays are legendary. Detroit area fixtures such as Killer Tim Brooks. I love Killer Tim Brooks. I thought he was great. There's just something about that guy. Mm-hmm. I can't even explain it. He wasn't even was a pretty big star, but usually putting everybody else over, but really good. George Cannon and Tony Mourinho ran an opposition office to him in the 1970s after finding cuts in their paychecks. Jack Reynolds, the voice of TV wrestling, and later an announcer for the WWF, said the Sheik tried to push him out of the scene in favor of his own ring announcer for one introduction against Johnny Powers. One intro he wanted to do. He and I did not get along, especially in the beginning. He could be a miserable SOB, said Reynolds, who did help the Sheik secure tickets to WrestleMania 1 a decade later. He didn't trust anybody. Now, do you remember Jack Reynolds? I remember him. I remember him from IWA, came to New York, New Jersey area as the first opposition of any kind against Vince McMahon in the 70s. It was Pedro Luis Martinez, and there's another guy that owned the company. And they went in a big stadium, Roosevelt Stadium in Elizabeth. And when that came on TV, we were like, what's this? We knew the wrestlers because we read the magazines, but we never saw them,
Right,
so
right.
It was mind-blowing that we were able to see that back then. Today you can watch anything. We had to search for it,
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, though, many of the Sheik's friends and regulars saw a kinder and funnier side. In 1962, Heenan washed the Sheik's car. He was in town for the Indianapolis office. He was my first friend in the business, he said. He befriended me. He talked to me. He gave me his car keys to wash and everything. He would give me a ride to the bus stop and give me $5. That was a lot of money for a kid.
Right.
Doyle, new to the business.
Sure.
$5. Yeah, so we're talking. It's probably maybe $50 today.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm happy if somebody hands me $50.
Mm-hmm.
They said Mickey Doyle, new to the business, got a glimpse of the Sheik's mystical powers one night during a driving snowstorm when the Sheik commandeered the wheel of an old Ford from crony Mike Porky Pig Lauren for a ride from Kitchener, Ontario to Detroit. It was like a blinding snowstorm going back to Windsor and then over to Detroit. And Porky's driving about 20 miles an hour. By this time, Tex McKenzie is with us. Remember Tex McKenzie? He was a big old cowboy. He needed a ride back. Sheik goes, "Let me drive. Pull this damn car over, Porky." I imagine that's how he sounded. And he pulls over. Sheik gets behind the wheel, and he's doing like 65. You could not see a thing. It was a whiteout. Porky was crying. Tex is taking pictures out. Taking pictures out of his wife. This is not me. Sheik happened to me before. The Sheik says, "Don't worry. I'm sitting there. I've been in the business 6 months, and I'm thinking I got nothing to worry about. The Sheik's driving. He'll get us back home in about 2 hours." It was unbelievable. Right through the snow like Santa Claus and the reindeer. People don't realize those trips, man. They take a lot out of you.
It really does.
You think they had a Wawa or any of these convenience stores to go in? And it was nothing.
Yeah,
you didn't buy bologna.
Yeah, pack a lunch, man.
Yeah. It said
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah. So now, but this is by the mid-'70s. The Detroit office was going downhill fast. Combination of hard economic times and bad booking that kept the aging star headlining long past his prime. The Sheik continued wrestling through the 1980s. It was always a massive draw in Japan and worked his final match in the U.S. in 1994. His health was shot as he climbed into the ring for a ceremony in Japan one last time in 1998. I think he did stuff after that, though. He died in January 2003.
He didn't happen to mention 1994 was the ECW show that he did.
Yeah. And something happened to him. He got
at
injured.
The show?
Yeah. He got injured.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I know he injured Linda Rufus' head with it banging her with that stick.
Really? Well,
I think he was after me, and I ran out of the way, and he ended up pounding her in the head with a stick until she cried. Yeah, it was a photographer. She was a photographer for a long time.
I mean, who knows?
I don't know what happened to him. He seemed fine.
Yeah. He died in January 2003.
Okay.
And his funeral was a perfect testament to the way he carefully guarded his character. The officiating priest called him by his given name just once and by the Sheik throughout the rest of the service. You'll still associate his name with wrestling, as sons Tom and Eddie Jr. were working to revive his big-time wrestling promotion. And Sheik trained stars like Rob Van Dam, Sabu, his nephew, continuing to headline cards. This guy was the most hated villain in wrestling, Supermouth Brzezinski said. He was a legend, and you're not going to find another like him. So I think it gives me chills sometimes because you don't realize like the weight that man, holds or held. So that's pretty cool.
That was a really nice write-up on him. I appreciate how, that writer actually took the time to do the appropriate research on him and credit him for all the events that he was involved in and the actual innovation of a lot of different things. It was just him at the time doing this stuff. So he was like a sideshow, sort of say. And other people followed along after him later on. But, he was definitely the first of and the innovator of the original innovator of violence, the Sheik.
Yeah. And I can't help but like, I never was like, I can't say like I was this huge Sheik fan. I'm not, I never really said that, but what I will say is that I respect the fact that he was able to make his own gimmick and wrestle the way he made everybody wrestle his way, which was one way, and I think as you would think that would be like, oh man, but I don't know, the way he was able to pull it off each time, you thought, oh, maybe this time he's really going to stick the guy in the neck with a fork and make him bleed out in the ring, So
right, and I'm sure that's what everyone was waiting for, because we have the fans we have now, but the crowd back then was pretty vicious. When it was early wrestling, they were vicious in a different way, because it was newer, and they didn't want to expect what to see, but they wanted the violence because that's what were they there for otherwise?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily. I don't think necessarily it's like they want it, or I don't know. I think they just know where to go if they do want it. Where it's not guaranteed to happen, But if it happens, I'll see it. And
was back then, every single solitary character wasn't a hardcore character, and they weren't running around with forks or spikes or little pipes or whatever. And the fact that he was the first one doing that, and he could scare people in the way that he did, really just puts him in the history books as like one of the first horror characters of professional wrestling, really, when you think about it.
And guess what? Nobody stopped them from doing it. They wanted it.
Everyone needs at least one.
The owners wanted to book
start it off,
Yeah. Well, what I used to feel like when I would go in the office and sit with Luke, he was booking the matches for Frankie Goodman early. Then another guy, and
Frank Goodman of USA Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, it would be either me and Domino, or me and Domino, or me and Manny. It's always that's what it was. And of course, you go in there and he goes, obviously I want you guys to move some furniture, and like, you can't say nothing better than me. I'm like, great, I don't want to get a guy in a headlock anyway. Being a furniture mover is a nice position to be. And when Luke calls you in the office, gives you an okay, is what he's giving you to do what you like to do. Because let's face it, me and Domino don't want to get in the ring and wrestle, right?
Yeah, how long was Frank Goodman running, Tommy?
How long?
How long has he been running? Because he's still running to this day, USA Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, but he was shut. He didn't run for years. He moved from New York, and then he went to Florida. He lives in like Disney. Like
Orlando, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Mickey Mouse is outside your door. Like that's
exactly.
Anyway, I love Frankie. So it was. I like that because they knew we would do it responsibly. We would never grab a fan. We would never let a fan get hurt. I would chase people out of the way if I was going to pick up take the fire extinguisher off the wall and hit somebody in the head with it, because that's what we did.
And the Sheik would chase people too. He would just chase them, and he wouldn't have to have anything in his hand. His face would just scare everyone away. So it's
see that subconsciously. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Subconsciously I was doing it. We were just talking about that. So there it is. I grabbed that. It's crazy. Now, this is one of my favorites. Okay, I think because of how well he portrayed it. He got his gimmick over, and that he's a tough guy. His name is Exotic Adrian Street.
Oh,
one of my all-time favorites. Bizarre.
He's on my list.
Yep. This guy was one of a kind for sure. I always was a big. Again, there's a mysterious part to this. There's something that's and watching him, you knew. Well, the weird thing was how he was portraying a gay character, kind of, but he had a girl with him.
Right, which, Linda.
So yeah, you're as a fan, and
he wrote a book more like a few years ago or so. I was actually helping him promote the book on social media for a little while. But it died down because now it's not news so much anymore. But he did have he had a lot going up to 3 years ago. Adrian Street's got a book, so get out there and look at that.
Absolutely.
Adrian Street is a great character, and his wife Linda, they've been together a long time, and they had one of the first gimmicks that was sort of like, I don't know, you read into it like he was gay, but you also read into it like maybe he wasn't gay, maybe it was just like an S&M sort of act, because Linda was the first of characters that was like a female, like a dominatrix sort of thing. So I think Adrian Street was playing more like a slave to Linda more than him some fruity guy. And I take this, and I take that a lot from, I was a big fan of Adrian Street and Linda. My gimmick later in wrestling was a dominatrix. And, I had slaves as my tag team, and I take that a lot from Adrian Street influence. So it's some of it.
You see that?
So Adrian Street, great character.
Think about, when you might be in the company of someone who's like a wrestling fan, and yet maybe never heard of exotic Adrian Street.
Oh, it's crazy.
I guess I always picked out a little bit not outlandish, but characters, and gimmicks a little bit outside the norm. I always liked that. So he fit the bill for sure. Plus, like, this guy was a bodybuilder. He competed in bodybuilding competitions, and so his background, we wouldn't even know that unless you read about him. So we're going to talk about Adrian Street right now, the exotic one. Did you see that picture I held up? Was him and his father with the coal miner's hat on? His father was a coal miner. So now imagine, you tell your father you're doing this thing, but I guess he supported him, because I don't think I heard otherwise, but we'll see. All right.
I heard a story about him. I heard a story about him at one point smacking the shit out of that. What was his name? That child molester, the known child molester.
Buck?
Not Buck. No. The white guy. I'll get back to you later on that. But I got a story about him. Okay. When I remember it, I'll tell it. But great story. Go on.
All right, here we go. Exotic Adrian Street. Liverpool Stadium was a rough place. The type of arena where the wrestlers had to fight their way to the ring. It was not a place where exotic Adrian Street found his recently recorded LP, complete with a fold-out poster in much demand. Conspiring with opponent John Cortez, Street decided to try something new. After parading in the ring in one of his fancy Dan outfits, Street saw that Cortez had a copy of his record. Now, this is a record that Adrian produced. Though he usually tried to never acknowledge his opponent before a match, Adrian gave him a nod of approval for his obvious good taste. Next thing is, he starts to rip up the poster into pieces and throws it all over the place. Street explained. He gets a hold of the record and breaks it over his knee, smashes it up, and throws it to the people. I'm screaming and shouting, going nuts. John says to somebody, "Get me another record." Oh, wow. The people were running and lining up in bloody hundreds to grab records and bring it down to John. They were bringing them down, and he was breaking them. So it's part of the gimmick, the to break the guy's records that he brought down here. He kept breaking the posters up and the records. I made more money that night than I had wrestling in about 6 months on the records, just to break the damn things up. Now, I couldn't care less what they did with them. I was just interested in the money and getting rid of the bloody things. So, recorded some little record. He probably had all these, stats of these things that they gave him. And it turned out that he could use them and make some money, using them as early gimmicks, selling them to the crowd. It was key to one of Street's philosophies about the business. You've got to give the people a chance to react to what you're doing and give the people a chance to perform, he said. The only difference between the wrestler and the people is that the wrestler is paid to perform and the people pay to perform. That makes sense. Especially when people are all signs and became a big thing, everybody, I think they were taking them, depending on what they said. When you more recently went to these, big events and had signs that were deemed not appropriate, they would send guys into the crowd to take them from them. So, not the best type of situation. I could see that turn into a problem. So and the thing that I didn't read in here that I read elsewhere is that he was subject to the same type of training in the snake pit with Ted Bentley. Ted Bentley was a trainer in the Wigan snake pit where people like Dynamite Kid were trained. So, there's a lineage there to shooters. And that, in fact, Adrian was, he was no slouch in that department. Street took whatever bouts he could, debuting in 1957 as Kid Jonathan. Within a couple of years, he was invited to bigger venues and started working under the real name as Nature Boy Adrian Street. But success didn't truly find Street until he found his image. Emerging from the dressing room, Street would pause just outside the doorway, allowing the commoners and attendants to take in his long blonde hair, elaborate outfit, and garish facial makeup, complete with embedded sequins and rhinestones. This is on his face, I believe. I go to the ring looking like a French poodle, and I carry on like a French poodle. But as soon as the bell went, I'd done my little bit of prancing about, and the time was right. I turned from a French poodle to a pit bull, Street said. So, he does that little bit, then he gets down to business, and when he gets down to business, he can prove right away that he's adept, and he can do that. And if things go wrong, he might be able to twist you up a little bit.
Tommy, let me just, while I'm recalling this here, I just pulled it up on my phone. Who I was referring to was Jimmy Seville, the pedophile Jimmy Seville. When Adrian Street found out that Jimmy Seville was a pedophile, he got him in a ring and tuned him up, from what I understand. I
haven't heard that.
Jimmy Seville, yeah. Look it up. Jimmy Seville, a huge pedophile in wrestling, uncovered about him and the young boys, just disgusting stuff. But Adrian Street tuned him up when he found out about this, and once he got him in the ring. So bravo, Adrian Street.
Yeah, he's a good man.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Playing up an unmanly character was a challenge, but Street always knew what he wanted to portray. Interviewers would hone in on his sexuality, but the exotic one would answer ambiguously. Whenever someone infers that I'm effeminate, it makes me want to scream. Over the years, various characters like Goldust, Rico Constantino used Street's gimmick. In Rico's case, excuse me, he actually went to study from the master. In 1969, Street met Linda Gunthrow Hawker, who would become the woman wrestler Blackfoot Sue as an Indian. And later his valet, Miss Linda, she added some different dimensions.
Oh, wait a minute. She was Blackfoot Sue, the female wrestler?
That's what it says here, yeah.
Oh, all right. I didn't realize that that's what she did before, previous to being his.
I don't think she looks like an.
Oh, okay.
I don't think she has the complexion for an Indian now.
Yeah, a lot of girls didn't back then, but they just slapped the headband on them, parted their hair in the middle, gave them some fringe and let them go to it.
Push them out the door.
Who was going to argue?
The exotic woman would answer ambiguously. Oh, okay, we got in 69th Street met Linda Gunthorpe Hawker, who would become the woman wrestler Blackfoot Sue, and later his valet, Miss Linda. Linda added a different dimension and more mystery. She would allow him to step on her back on the way into the ring, straighten the robe of her perfectionist pansy, and occasionally interfere by pulling a leg or bringing out a foreign object. So, she was there to help him win some matches.
She was a submissive mistress.
Yeah.
Switchable, submissive, dominant sort of character.
Yeah.
I get it.
These are pioneers, though. I mean,
yes.
Everything else before that was like, I'm sure throughout history, there was always people that were going toward the edge, pushing the limit. But
but there was no guys wearing gay harnesses and all of full face makeup and ponytails and stepping on their valet. You know what I mean? That was original as you could get back then, and now everything is just like a poor copy.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that more than likely, in a lot of situations, they took it upon themselves to start to interject that type of style, screw the promoter what he wants. Just like if I go to work for a promoter back in the day, that's not like he's got no lineage, he's got no nothing. He's just a guy that wants to be a promoter, but he has none of the tools he needs. We don't do what he says. We worked for me. Of
course not. You work your own match and you do your own thing because if you don't know what he's doing, you know what you're doing.
Exactly. We did. We told Panzerino they want us to work as a tag team. First of all, neither one of us were tag team people. We didn't care against another team. I said, no. You split us up, so I know I can have him in the ring because I'm not working with these guys.
Right.
And that's what we did. He told the one kid he had a little bandage from the night before or whatever. He told the one kid when he was in there with him, open this up. So. The kid hit him, nothing happened. He said, tag out for me to get in. He goes, Tommy, open this up. Beep, I hit him. It like burst.
Gusher. I've seen you hit some gushers in your day.
But, the faggot kid couldn't even open an already open cut,
Right. Sad.
Yeah. They didn't like us, so I would have thought that would have been a chance for them to take a cheap shot.
So we're rolling up on around 9 minutes left. So
okay. All right, so let me see where we're at here. Okay, so now he's with her, and they're going to take off wrestling. So Street and Hawk set off for the North American market in 1981, beginning in Calgary, then heading to Mexico and Los Angeles before finding a real home in the southeastern U.S. Promoters and bookers didn't always know what to do with him. Adrian would do anything for attention. He would have shown his private parts on television if he thought it would have done him some good. British promoter Max Crabtree, who was one of the big promoters over there. Boy, I can't see how they just completely lost my place. That's my eyes, I guess it is. Street has no problem explaining the nuances of what he was trying to achieve. My idea of a bad guy is possibly different than a good many others. To me, there's no reason why a bad guy's got to get cheap heat all the time when he's got to growl and scream at everybody, jump in the ring, poke somebody in the eye, kick them in the balls as his first move, and scream and shout until his eyeballs pop out. My way of doing it was to go into the ring and wrestle and show the people what a good wrestler I was.
He was amazing.
Rip Rogers, huh?
He was amazing.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember this guy, Rip Rogers. He was
sure.
Pretty big star. He says Rip Rogers was the heel in a year-long feud with Street in the Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi areas. You had to go with the flow with Adrian. Me and Adrian never talked over a match, Rogers said. All that mattered was the finish. There you go. And what we were coming back with. The rest was all ad-lib out there. No prearranged bullshit like there is today.
Yeah, see, that's when you know how to work.
Yeah. I told
you don't have to talk anything over. It's like all by feeling.
Yeah, and a couple times, Manny, like I tried to get more out of him, and be like, "I'll see you out there."
Exactly.
But what about you got to finish? Yeah, the referee knows the finish. Tell him to tell us when it's time to go home. We'll wrap it up, and that'll be it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no, there's no.
Like the Puerto Rico separate locker room business, you know, like you'll figure it out once you get in there.
Exactly. Okay. So what Rip Rogers was another great talent, was the heel in that Mississippi area. And again, they're trying to tell you all that matters is, you know, the finish and the quality of the match, not like trying to get all your moves in and try to stick to a set plan. It doesn't work that way. Adrian was a guy who looked like he couldn't bust a grape. And in real life, that's not true though. And in real life was probably one of the toughest wrestlers around. He said explaining the problems working with street style was very difficult. It was very awkward, different timing, different execution of moves. In the old days when we prided ourselves on having good matches with anybody, Adrian was the kind of guy that if I had a match with Kamala one night, he wasn't limited by what his character would let him do. Adrian was limited, honestly, by what he could do. But he knew exactly who Adrian Street was. There's a paragraph left. By the late 1980s, Street had settled into the Gulf Coast region, where he still resides today. He and Linda make a living primarily by fashioning custom-made attire through their bizarrebazaar.com website. Street also has taught wrestling at his Skull Crushers Wrestling School, which blew away during a hurricane. What a shame. A couple of years back. He still takes occasional indie bookings as well, despite having battled off throat cancer in 2001. Retirement is not on the horizon, he joked. I can't do nothing. I'm not intelligent enough to do nothing, meaning other than wrestling.
Right, then he has to do something. If you go check out, actually, him and his wife Linda have an amazing company that they make tights, wrestling tights through. Just
They've been doing that
really
for years.
High quality, amazing stuff. Yeah. So, you know, if anyone wants to go check out, you know, Adrian Street and Miss Linda's, you know, clothing attire line, do that if you need wrestling tights. So I thought that was a great episode of Wrestling Archives. Some of it's my two favorite people. Actually, we got to cover, which was great. So if you didn't know a whole lot about these characters, hopefully, you know, the Sheik and Adrian Street a little bit more now. And, you know, that's our goal here, to just bring you back to the past and make you, if you don't remember, just rewind it so that we can re-educate you on the history of professional wrestling. So, anything else to say before we close, Tommy?
No, just that, you know, sometimes the stars that you don't know about were so much more influential than the ones you do know about. And in reading like these excerpts, you know, you get to learn that the further back you go, the closer you get to the originator. Okay, because everybody's done everything before, gimmick wise. You know, so when you find a couple of people that don't fit right into a category like these, Linda and Adrian, I mean, you know, they're just unique. They don't come around every generation. But that's basically what I'm trying to say. They came and went, and if you don't read about them, you won't know about them. And if you don't know about them, you're missing something, because this is the foundation that wrestling was built on.
These are all the originators of the business and the history of our business. And if it wasn't for them, there would have been no us and no you. So just remember that. And thank you for joining us on Wrestling Rewind this week for Wrestling Archives with Tommy Cairo. And we hope you'll join us again next week. We are here every Sunday at 7 p.m. on the Monty and the Pharaohs Network. So please join us next time as we, I think we have an interview coming up next. So stay tuned for that. And until the next time, have a nice night and a nice life.